This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Good afternoon, everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Bruchim Abam to the Kollel Agra de Perka. We're continuing to say it's a fascinating subject. This is literally the most cutting-edge topic on the minds of all scientists and technologists, and it should be on our mind regarding how we view it in a halachic sense. We began the subject last week. Perhaps we'll do two parts of it, because this second part is not specific to artificial intelligence, and that's the topic of the day. This is going to be a 3 or 4 part series on AI, artificial intelligence. So, Bruchim Abam to the Kollel Agra de Perka. Good afternoon, everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Wonderful to see everyone. Let's briefly review what we learned last week, and then we'll proceed. Last week we began discussing voice activation. If there would be a machine that you could speak to it and it will do work for you, would that be considered a malacha? At first glance, the Torah says, "Leisaseh malacha," don't do work. Usually speaking is not considered work. If someone speaks lashon hara, they don't get malchus, because it's a lav shein by maisa. But we began yesterday with what seems to be the prophecy of Rav Moshe Feinstein, who said that if they would ever create a machine that you could speak to and it would do work for you, Rav Moshe says off the bat, it would be malacha d'oraisa. We explained the basis of this very clearly. The Gemara Bava Metzia discusses whether if you muzzle an animal while it's threshing, without physically muzzling it, but rather by yelling at it with your voice. Rabbi Yochanan says you're chayiv, Reish Lakish says you're pater. Rabbi Yochanan says you're chayiv because the movement, the contortions of your mouth are an action. Tosfos asks, an action? So why did Rabbi Yochanan say that there are 3 lavin that do not involve action that you still get malchus for? Swearing, timura, and cursing. But here Rabbi Yochanan says speaking is an act. So why does Rabbi Yochanan refer to those as lav she'em by maisa? To which Tosfos says the reason why Rabbi Yochanan in our Gemara regarding muzzling an animal with your voice, the reason why Rabbi Yochanan considers that an act is because your words produced a significant act. By screaming at the animal ceased and desist from eating. So it's not that the words alone are an act. Cursing is not an act. Swearing is not an act. But screaming at an animal, causing it to desist from eating, that is an act. Tosfos goes on further to say that even timura, even if somebody were to speak, and by speaking, transferring kedusha from one animal to the next, that too would be considered an act. Because even though your words did not create an act, your words created a significant result. And therefore, based on that, it seems that if you would be able to speak to a machine and the machine would do work for you, you say, "Hey Alexa, hey Google, hey Siri, do me a favor, turn on the lights. It's hot and nishtov Shabbos garet." Now I got an email this week that why isn't this a v'daber davar? We know you're not allowed to ask a Gentile to do work because we learn that from v'daber davar. Wouldn't this be v'daber davar? Of course this would be. So there are 2 ways of looking at it. Number one, we're suggesting it's much worse than v'daber davar. V'daber davar may only be d'Rabbanan. This is your words, you yourself are doing an act. It's not a matter of what you say, you yourself are acting, because your words bring about significant result. If you ask a Gentile to do work, then that's not called an act, because the person who you asked, he could or could not do it. He may do it, he may not do it. Even if you know he'll do it, ultimately it's his choice. So there the issue is v'daber davar, it's a d'Rabbanan. Here it's a d'oraisa, because your words brought about significant result. And we mentioned that we know there's a general principle whenever there's a machlokes Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, we paskin like Rabbi Yochanan, and that's in fact how the Rambam paskins. The Rambam paskins, if you muzzle an animal with your voice, you're considered acting on Shabbos. It's a maisa on Shabbos, and therefore we concluded and we saw this in the Minchas Yitzchak and Rav Moshe Feinstein Zechus Levracha, that dibur that is ka'avid maisa is considered a maisa, and therefore voice activation would definitely be considered an act. One little technicality we have to discuss, and this will be part 2 of the series, and maybe today we'll do part 3 as well. And that is, okay, I understand it's considered an act, but is it considered a direct act? Or could you make the case that this is not a direct act, this should be considered something more like Grama? This should be considered something like Grama. The truth is, we could really trim this down to a different case and discuss turning on a light switch on Shabbos. We know one cannot make a fire on Shabbos. To light a light bulb, the old-fashioned light bulb, incandescent light bulb, that's also lighting a fire. But the question is, what about turning on a switch? Because if you think about it, the electric current is already in the wire. The only thing is the electric current cannot get to the bulb because there's a gap in the circuit. By flipping the switch, you connect the circuit. So, are you really actively causing a fire on Shabbos? Are you really directly, better said, are you directly lighting a fire on Shabbos? Or is the fire there? The fire has no way to travel. So by flipping the switch, you're just building a bridge. You're building a bridge in the circuit. You're completing the circuit. So would that be directly lighting a fire on Shabbos? Would that be burning a fire on Shabbos? Or would you say, no, that's not burning a fire on Shabbos. That's just a grama. That's indirect. By completing the circuit, and I know there's the opinion of the Chazon Ish that it might be makabepatish, it might be building, but those are not the traditional viewpoint of electricity. Usually electricity is considered fire, mamish. So the question is that directly lighting a fire? You're just building a bridge. You're enabling the fire to get from point A to point B. So is that havara midairaisa? So and that would apply to a voice command. Am I doing an act or am I just triggering an act? And if I'm triggering an act, maybe it won't be permitted, but it won't be dairaisa. Maybe it should only be derabanan. So to understand electricity and to understand what is considered in halacha acting, what is considered triggering, what is considered causing, we have to examine very carefully 2 cases on the same page in the Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara in Sanhedrin is found on Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Beis. Itmar, Amar Rav Papa said, Haiman de Kafse Lechavre. A guy tied up his friend. He didn't like him. His friend was bothering him. He doesn't like the fact that his friend doesn't go for the same sports team that he does. So he had enough of him. He's going to tie him up and he's going to kill him. He feels that's a justified recourse for his friend not rooting for his sports team. He's told him many times that he has to mend his ways. His friend is not listening, so he ties him up. But he's not going to shoot him. What he's going to do is, he's going to put him near the Hoover Dam. He's then going to make a hole in the Hoover Dam. And within moments, this friend will be washed away in a tsunami. And he's going to wipe his hands clean, saying, it's not me, I didn't do it. It's the Hoover Dam's fault. You see, what did I do? There's no aveira for to tie someone up. People, they used to do it. When I grew up, there was a shul where I davened in on Simchas Torah. They used to tie up the Shliach Tzibur. So there's no aveira on the Torah to tie someone up. It's not a nice thing to do. It's not advisable. If you want to make somebody your friend, avoid tying him up. It's not a good thing to do. But it's not one of 613 aveiros, 613 mitzvahs. Anyway, the guy ties up his friend, and he then breaks the dam. Are you a murderer? Is he a murderer or is he not a murderer? Says the Gemara, Giri Didehu. It's his arrow. U'mechayev, and he's chayev. In other words, let's say somebody shoots an arrow. Say, well, what did I do wrong? There's no Aveira in the world to pull an arrow back in a quiver. It says in the Torah, I can't pull an arrow back in a quiver. Okay. And then I let go. So, what do you want from me? Say, oh, but you caused his death. Hey, it's a Grama. Grama is not a murderer. If somebody has a gun and he pulls the trigger back, so why is he a murderer? Why is he a murderer? He just pulled the trigger back. And then when he let go, so that caused the bullet to fly out. But we say it's your bullet. It's your arrow. So, the halacha is, Giri didehu. It's his arrow. It's his arrow. U'mechayev and yechayev. But says the Gemara, Hani mili b'kayach rishain. That's only in the first kayach. Aval b'kayach sheni. But let's say the tsunami, let's say the guy's like 10 blocks away. And, the water has to slowly go until, and then go down a little bit of a drain and then get to him. That's kayach sheni, grama ba'amahu. That's only a grama. Okay, that's the first case. The first case is you tie your friend up, you break the dam, the water washes the guy away, you're chayev. Why? It's your arrow. And now we're going to take a 30-second timeout for battery switch. Okay. So, let's talk about another case. Va'amar Rava. And I think this is something we could all understand. That you can't call that a grama. Because I did that. I tied up my friend, I broke the dam, and I put my friend in the inevitable situation where a force that I unleashed is going to kill him. So that should be understandable. What makes things difficult is the next couple lines, which is a little bit higher up on the page actually. But it's, I put it number 11. Va'amar Rava, Zarak boichetz. If somebody shot an arrow, utris biyadai, and the guy who you shot the arrow at has a shield in his hand. Okay, so again, you didn't do anything wrong. The guy has a shield. He is adept at blocking arrows. So you just aimed a arrow at his shield. Fine. So Ruvain shot an arrow at Shimon. Shimon's holding a shield. Uba achar. And Levi comes along. And before the arrow hits Shimon's shield, Levi comes and he kicks away Shimon's shield. And now the arrow hits Shimon between the eyes. What's the halacha? Levi's pater. Not only is Levi pater, but what if Ruvain, who shot the arrow, he's such a fast guy, he outran the arrow, kicked away the shield. So now not only is he shooting the arrow, he's also the guy knocking away the shield. V'natlai, v'afilu kadam enala, even if the guy who shot it came and he took it away, pater, he's pater. Why? Levi's pater for kicking away the arrow? For kicking away the shield, right? Two cases. Ruvain shoots an arrow at Shimon. Shimon's holding a shield. Levi comes along and knocks away the shield so the arrow hits Shimon. Or even if Ruvain comes along and knocks away the shield so that the arrow is going to hit Shimon. Levi's pater for knocking away the shield. Ruvain's pater for shooting the arrow and knocking away the shield. Why? Because at the time that Ruvain shot the arrow, mivsak piske gire, his arrows were severed. At the time Ruvain shot the arrow wasn't going to do any damage because Shimon's holding a shield. Which means when Reuven shot the arrow, they were not his arrows. Those arrows were harmless. But Levi kicked away the shield. Okay, what Avera is Levi doing? He's removing a protection from Shemaim. Again, that's Grama. Levi's not killing Shemaim. Levi's causing Shimon to die. That he's pater for. Levi's not killing Shemaim. Levi is causing Shimon to die. So the $1 million question that the Rishonim ask on that Gemara, the Rama asks on that Gemara, is that, wait a second, if by Levi taking away a shield, he's not killing Shimon, all he's doing is removing Shimon's protection, then why is it that if a guy comes, ties up his friend, and makes a hole in the dam, he shouldn't be killing Shimon, he's just removing Shimon's protection by making a hole in the dam. There's water looming here. The wall is the protection of Shimon, and by making a hole in the dam, you're removing the protection. So why is it that if someone shoots an arrow, removing the shield is a grama, and making a hole in the dam is not a grama, it's your arrow? Why when you make a hole in the dam is it your arrow, and when you remove the shield, it's a grama? That's the question of the day. That's why Hashem kept us alive for today, to study the distinction between these two cases, okay? They seem to be identical. However, they are not. And they are so different that literally the difference between them will explain to us why we can't turn on a light switch on Shabbos. Again, setting up the case, if you break a hole in the dam, even though you're just removing the guy's protection, what's protecting him from the water, that's called your arrow. And yet if an arrow is headed to a guy and you remove his shield, that's not your arrow, you're a grama ba'alma. And basically, what Reb Chaim Ozer Grzinski, in his classic tshuva on electricity, Shailas Tshuva Achiezer, Siman Gimel, Chelek Gimel, Siman Samach, he says a davar noira. He says a wondrous thing, quoting the Rama. And in a nutshell, and maybe we'll read it inside, he says there's a very big difference between making a hole in a dam, which seems to be just removing somebody's shield, and taking away someone's shield. Namely, when an arrow is headed toward Shimon, and Levi comes along, or even if Reuven comes along and knocks away the shield, listen carefully. If the shield is knocked away and removed after the arrow has already come to the shield, that doesn't do anything. It won't inflict any harm on Shimon. When will it inflict harm? If you do it while the arrow is headed there. Okay. So while the arrow is headed there, I took away the shield. Did I do anything? No, I didn't do anything, because the arrow didn't come yet. Whoa, but you're making him susceptible to the arrow. Okay, I'm making him susceptible, but I'm not killing him. It's a grama. The arrow's on its way. I removed the shield. So what am I doing? I am removing something that could protect someone. Okay, that's a grama. That's a full-fledged grama. I'm removing something that could protect someone. What did I do? I just took away your shield. Oh, but eventually the arrow's going to come. Causing someone to be in a situation where ultimately they're going to die is a grama. So then why, if I break a hole in a dam, is it considered my arrow? Listen very carefully. Because the water is looming there. The only thing holding it back is the dam. When I open up the dam, will the water come in a few days? Will the water come in an arrow? Or will the water spurt out immediately? The water will spurt out immediately. Because the water is pressing up against the dam. And the water would wash the guy away right now if not for the dam. So by opening up the dam, I am triggering, activating the water immediately. When you activate when you activate a force immediately, that's your arrow. But when there's an arrow shooting, and I take away a shield, the arrow's going to come. But it's not right there in front of it. It's going to come. So that's just a grama. You see, when there is a force right there, that as soon as I remove the impediment, I thereby activate and trigger a force, the force is there. There's something holding back the force. The moment I remove the impediment, I trigger that force, I activate the force, that is my arrow. It's like shooting a gun. No, shooting a gun should be a grama, because I just pulled back the trigger. And that causes the bullet to shoot. Yeah, no kidding. But by pulling the trigger back, it immediately unleashes that force. You immediately unleash a force that's there, and you're the one who unleashed it, you activated it, that's your arrow. But if you shoot an arrow at Shimon, and nothing would have happened to Shimon, because Shimon has a shield. If I then outrun the arrow and pull away the shield, I didn't activate the arrow, I made it that ultimately he will be hit by an arrow. That's a grama. Says Reb Chaim Ozer Grzinski. Now, if my timing is so precise that I remove the shield a nanosecond before the arrow comes, that is tantamount to activating the arrow. Because now it's not just I make him susceptible to the arrow that's coming. The arrow is literally by the shield, and for me to pull it away that second, that's like shooting the guy. Then it becomes my arrow. Now let's apply that to turning on a light switch. Says Reb Chaim Ozer, you have an electric current in a circuit. You have an electric current in the wire. The problem is the current cannot travel further because the circuit is broken. So that's like water looming in a dam. The moment I flick the light switch, I close the circuit. The electricity will travel so fast that it will light up the incandescent bulb in a nanosecond. It's going to travel 186,000 miles per second. So what am I doing? I'm triggering a looming force that the moment I close the circuit, I cause the fire to shoot up and to light up the incandescent bulb. That's not a grama. That's me. That's my arrow. That's my arrow. It's no different than someone who ties up his friend and then makes a hole in the dam. And therefore, says Reb Chaim Ozer Grzinski, that's considered not grama of electricity, that's burning a fire. Therefore, coming back to the question at hand, and whether if somebody speaks to Alexa and say, hey Alexa, turn on the light, or turn on the AC, are you being goyreim? Now think about it. There's a force, there is a capability of this technology, and by speaking to it, which we determined already is your act if you're going to cause a result, you immediately set off that a light goes on, or that air conditioner goes on, or that heat goes on, or that a screen goes on. That's not a grama. That is your direct action, and it would be a malacha d'oraisa. It's no different than flicking on a light switch. If you want to see the Achiezer inside, maybe it's kedai to see inside. Shabbos Teshuvas Achiezer Chelek Gimel Simin Samach V'hinei be'ikar hadavar shemevarim b'hayarchon. Regarding the subject that's explained, Oifen halakas ha'elektri, regarding lighting electricity, shebeter mechnisu l'toich hazachuches, before it enters the glass bulb, hefsek yesh bai, there's a interruption, uchshamasavi v'shagalgal, when you turn the circle, nasa tzipoy katzer zeh me'ein gesher, you create some kind of bridge, shahar zerem over alav, that the current flows through, so then you could say, Yesh Ladan de Besoivivai La Kaftar Shabbatay Chamarech Ene La Grama Ba'alma. Maybe you'll say it's just a Grama. And it should be similar to what we say in Sanhedrin, Ayin Zayin Amud Beis, that if you shoot an arrow, and the guy's holding a shield, and somebody comes away and he takes away the shield, even if you yourself come and take away the shield, you're pater. Why? Because at the time that you shot the arrow, at the time that you shot it, your arrows were ceased. So we see if you remove a shield that prevents an arrow, even though you make the arrow available to hit the guy, that this is not considered mazik biyadayim, it's a grama. So why don't we say the same thing regarding Shabbos, that flicking on a light switch is a grama? Because I'm not lighting the fire, I'm just creating a bridge, I'm allowing that current to travel. So why is allowing a current to travel different than allowing an arrow to travel? Says Reb Chaim Ozer, you have to understand, I asked an electrician, Bani Sha'alti Lu'uman Electrotechnic. I asked an electrician, Beheroli Oifen Tachnes HaMechuna HaNe'evedes Po B'Soviv HaKaftar Shabbatay Chamarech. So I asked the electrician, and he showed me that Levad Shemeser HaGesher, besides removing an impediment, mechaber imzeh gama chutim ba'ofen shebesiva v'kafter mechaber zechutim mamish lois havar b'yadayim. You're connecting the wires, so you're actively lighting the fire. But he says even without that, he says, even if you say that it happens on its own, but based on the Gemara in Sanhedrin, that if you tie your friend up and you break the dam, so he quotes the Rama, who asks, he says, "Vi kashalach michti hachalav b'da'azim mikaychaskinan." Why, when you activate the dam, are you chayev? The water's not going on. Actually, it's counterintuitive. Think about it. If you shoot an arrow, you shot the arrow, and you pull away the shield, your putter. That arrow was your force. And yet if you break a dam, that the water is going on its own. It's not going from my force. Then I'm chayiv. In a way, it's counterintuitive. By the dam, the water is going on its own. It's the force of the water. It's not his force. By the arrow, it's his arrow. And yet by his arrow, you're pater for taking away the shield. And by the dam, you're chayiv for removing the dam. It's counterintuitive. By the dam, the water goes on its own. By the arrow, it's his arrow. And yet by the arrow, he's pater. And by the dam, he's chayiv. So the Yad Ramah wants to know, it's going mikoichai. But there's an interruption. He says, excuse me, by the dam, the water's not going through his kayach. There's something in between the water and him, and you took it away, so the water's going on its own. Why are you chayiv? It's not his kayach. And why is it any different than shooting an arrow with a shield and someone takes away the arrow? So what do we see? That if taking away something between the victim and the arrow, you're pater, even though the arrow was your force, certainly by the water where the water's not going from your force. Why are you chayev? So the Reb Chaim Ozer says very simply, when you take away the shield, you're taking away the shield before the arrow gets to the guy. Because if you take it away after it gets to the guy, then removing the shield wouldn't do anything. So you had to take away the shield before it gets to the guy. So then what am I doing? I didn't do anything. Remove a shield. He's in the same healthy condition he was as before. Oh, you're saying you're making him susceptible because the arrow is eventually going to come? Ha'amru kol soif hayreg lavai pater. We say, if the murder is going to come, your pater. The grama ba'almahu, it's just grama.
Rabbi,
Yes.
When Kavanah play a role in this? If a person is moving the shield, does that mean that he wants the person to be hit?
Absolutely. His kavanah is to murder the guy.
Yeah, exactly. So you would think that he should be guilty.
But again, you're not a good guy. The guy's not a good guy, and he's not going to get shlishi in the shul. But he's not a halachic murderer because he did it through indirect cause. That's not called direct. Why? Because he removed the shield before the arrow was going to get there. So yes, he caused his death, and he's going to be punished in heaven, but he's not considered a murderer in terms of the courts down here in this world.
But what was his reason for removing the shield? I mean, that's the thing.
Because the guy is a Met fan, and he doesn't like Met fans. That was his...
I was saying, so it wasn't an innocent type of act.
Not at all. The guy was premeditated. He's been practicing knocking out shields for 10 years. But nevertheless, in terms of what occurred, it was not considered a direct murder because the arrow was headed there. So then, what about by the dam? Aval hacha dechisalki laafra. When you remove the dam, the mafsik bein maya ladidei, that interposes between him and the water, maya havanogid afra. The water was leaning up against the dam. The water was looming by the dam. So the way I like to explain it is that when you remove the dam, you activated the water. So now the water is you. The water is your arrow. But when you shot an arrow at a guy with a shield, the arrow won't accomplish anything. So your arrow is dead. Oh, what are you going to get me for? Removing the shield? Think carefully. Removing a shield doesn't activate the arrow. It makes it that ultimately the arrow will hit. That's Grama. Removing a dam activates the water because the water is right there pressing up against the dam. It's like shooting a bullet. Removing a dam is like shooting a bullet. Removing a shield is not like shooting a bullet. It's making the guy ultimately susceptible to the bullet. But applying this back to turning on a light switch, when you turn on a light switch where the current is up, it's right up to the edge of the wire. The only problem is it can't travel because the circuit's not completed. The moment you close the circuit, you're activating the current. That's your arrow. By the way, if somebody turns on the switch of an electric chair, he's a murderer. Because again, that's his arrow. Or if somebody flicks a switch and it causes natilas yadayim, for natilas yadayim you need something called koyach gavra. It has to be the force of man. It can't be a secondary koyach. That's considered the force of man. The distinction that the Rama quoted by Rabbi Achiezer is making is that when you remove a shield, you're just allowing the arrow to reach the guy. When you break a dam, you're activating the force of the water. So it says Rabbi Achiezer, Harei Mavur Midivrei Harama. It is clear from the Rama. Dimhaya hachetz samuch mamish lahatris. If the chetz was so he says a chiddush now, that if you were to remove the shield a millisecond before it would have got, if you remove the shield a millisecond before the arrow gets there, that would be comparable to breaking the dam down. Because now you're not just taking away a shield and making him susceptible to the arrow, but since the arrow is right there, you then activate the arrow, and you then in a way have ownership over the arrow. The arrow is you're unleashing that force. You're activating that force. Not just putting the person in a situation where he will ultimately be affected by that force.
Well, then I also think if you're the one who's shooting the arrow and you're taking away the shield, that to me is a direct act.
Again, but we have to, I understand, but we have to view each one separately. So the guy shot an arrow, right? But he didn't do anything because the guy's holding a shield. So shooting the arrow, we're not going to nail him for. So now he quickly runs and he removes the shield. That's also Grama, because he is just making the victim susceptible to a coming arrow.
basically it was as if that he was no shield, that he shot the arrow, that knowing that there was nothing, no barrier to prevent the arrow from hitting the guy.
But the only thing is when he shot the arrow, there was a barrier. It's a later act to remove the barrier. So the shooting was not problematic because there was a barrier. The removal of the barrier is not a good deed, but it's not a direct act of murder. It is removing of a barrier. But we don't view removing a dam as removing a barrier. We view the removing of a dam as activating the force of the water. It's like shooting a gun. And this Gemara is the source for not using electricity on Shabbos. Why electricity is not a Grama, why electricity is your act. It's amazing. It's amazing that a Gemara in Sanhedrin that's not talking about Shabbos, it's not talking about fire, it's not talking about electricity, is marshaled as a very compelling source that turning on a light switch on Shabbos is your direct Maisa. Now, if, let's say, by turning on a light switch, you cause a timer to go on, that timer in 10 seconds will cause the light to go on, that's a grama. And then maybe someone who's a chayla would be allowed to do that, possibly. But the classic light switch, the classic way electricity works, it's considered your act. Reb Chaim Oizer is mechadesh that if you were to remove the shield a millisecond before the arrow comes, that would be more than just removing a barrier. That would be reckoned activating the oncoming arrow. So that's coming back to the voice activation, where you're not merely causing a light to go on. If you say, "Hey Alexa, turn on the light. Make yourself useful. Turn on the light." Your words are producing a significant act. So we already determined that was an act, and it's not a grama. It's activating a force that's immediate. So that would be a malacha d'oraisa. I also received an email during the week of someone who says that their father asked Rav Shlomo Zalman about if one were to cause malacha with their thought. That Rav Shlomo Zalman said it's meleches machsheves shehutra. It's a meleches machsheves that is permitted. That may be, but Rav Shlomo Zalman, I do not think concluded that way. He has explicitly in his sefer Ma'orei Eish, I have it on the sheets over here, where based on let's see if I could pull it up. In Ma'orei Eish, Chelek Beis Shar Yud Siman Yud Gimel, Hafalas Machshir Chashmali Be'emtzos Machshava, where he brings from the Zakan Aron, who says from the Mechilta that if somebody cooks through machshava or dibur, they're chayev. And he wanted to say that even though by all other malachas we say only derech asiyah is asar, grama shari, not by bishul va'afiyah. So Rav Shlomo Zalman says, well, what about the fact that you're only cooking through thought? And it's not that malacha through thought is not a malacha, says Rav Shlomo Zalman. It's that the issur of baking and cooking is only with fire. If you cook in the sun, you're patur. So if, let's say, you caused in your thought that the food should be cooked, that the food should, let's say you could cause through your thought that the man should taste like something cooked, that would not be mavashel, not because, says Rav Shlomo Zalman, thought would not be able, one would not be obligated chayiv for thought on Shabbos, but rather because you're not cooking with a fire. You're just making the food taste as if it's cooked in a fire. But if you could do malacha aydei machshava, it does seem like Rav Shlomo Zalman would forbid it. The same way we hold that if you cause malacha through voice activation, it will be a problem. If somehow, and I think there is, if machines could detect cerebral activity and thereby do malacha, that would also be a problem. So next week, we'll see if we break it up into two shiurim. We're going to continue on the subject more in a hashkafic sense, and that is, with all of the advancements in artificial intelligence, is there any, or what is, if any, what is the advantage of human intelligence over artificial intelligence? Actually, they just reported in the news last week that using AI, there were these super bugs that they were not able to treat with antibiotic because these bugs became antibiotic resistant. So people would pick up these infections in the hospital, or soldiers would pick it up in Afghanistan or Iraq, these super bugs that were resistant to antibiotic. And using AI, using these algorithms, they were able to test like 7,000 drug compounds, and they're able to identify exactly what was resistant about the infection, and they're able to come up with the right antibiotic for it. So the question is, is our meager mortal intelligence any match for artificial intelligence? And will human intelligence become obsolete in an age of computer-generated intelligence? Okay, Rabbi, so we're going to hold it over here. We'll do the next part next week. I wish you all a wonderful day. Bracha v'hatzlacha, and kol tov.
Thank you.
Kol tov, kol tov. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Kol tov.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.